I'm Pima County Attorney Laura Conover, and welcome to the People's Office podcast. Our goal here is to share and discuss some of the most important information and issues affecting Pima County today. We're having real conversations and reflections on what you care about as we do our part to create change in the justice system.
Greetings and welcome back to the People's Office podcast. I'm Laura Conover, your Pima County Attorney. And we'll always know that this particular podcast was filmed in the spring because this is my spring allergy voice. Sorry about that. I also want to take a moment now that we're into our fifth or sixth podcast to say that this is only possible by the magic that happens behind the cameras. I want to give a particular shout out to Tony Gallego, who runs the cameras and makes the art happen. And in particular, something very exciting happened in 2024, which is that the Pima County Attorney's Office became one of the many employers across the community that has the joy of hosting and training and teaching students from San Miguel High School. And so also present with us this morning for this particular podcast, working the cameras behind the scenes, is one of our students, Judas, and I'm thrilled that he's here with us too. So for this podcast, we're going to shake things up a little bit. I love how I get to bring in subject matter experts on an issue of the day that we can learn more about, and then I get to ask all the questions and I get to pick their brains. And this time, Chandrea Thomas, our communications director, is with us, and she's going to lead the discussion on a little bit of a look back at 2024, but definitely a lot to think about as we launch into a whole new chapter here. You know, we're thinking a lot of this about this, I think, as chapter 2 of a whole new 4-year term, and the opportunity, the potential, gratitude for the blessing of it. The challenges, of course.
There have been some.
There have been some, and there will be more.
Yes, but we're ready. That's the thing. We are ready. We are ready.
We're ready. We are ready to, what the world has thrown at us in just the first few weeks of January and February, and we're going to be ready for it, and we're going to be stronger together. That's my thinking. But yeah. So now I will await.
You're gonna let the volley the ball over here.
That's right.
And it's funny, Laura. I was thinking about the first podcast we ever did. Was a conversation that we had about your trip down south. So it's really interesting to think about like how we know each other more since then, and how much has changed overall since over the past couple of years. So with that being said, let's just jump right into this whole thing.
Yeah.
So 2024, that was a year. It was a time. Okay.
It was.
Yeah. So what are your initial reflections on 2024?
I think what's interesting is that any first-term government official, you're going to have this high learning curve. And we did it during COVID. We arrived in January of 21 at the height of COVID, before the vaccine rollout. And so by year 3, I think we really, we were trying to look at COVID in the rearview mirror. We were getting our feet under us and feeling really strong. And then suddenly I needed to keep that going, and then also separately have a second job of deciding to run for a second term and to ask the people whether they wanted us to keep going or not. And so that was hard.
Complicated.
And complicated. And I was really, I was so strict and kind of over the top about keeping the two separate. I really wanted the people here to be so free from it and unbothered by it and not distracted by it. And I think for the most part, we did a really good job of that. That I was able to kind of keep it completely separate with a completely separate team. Another amazing team, almost as amazing as this team here. So yeah.
And I think as a communications director here, there was just, as a result of the year itself, there was a lot of misinformation about the office that I was part of having to correct.
Right.
So let's just get into that really quickly. So what are the things you would say need to be cleared up as far as misinformation or misunderstandings about this office?
The number one issue for sure, I thought, was the question about how we were handling domestic violence cases here in the office. And, few questions more important or more critical, right? It was repeated time and time and time again that in 22 and 23 we had dismissed 900 domestic violence cases. I asked for, the authors of that, I asked where they were getting that information. They weren't willing to share that information. And so I dealt with it as I could, as a messenger and in checking to make sure our quality had not changed here. And then it wasn't until the transition that we could do, we had to do a deep dive on every single domestic violence case that had been presented. And the only way to do that is in context. You can pick a number like 900 out of thin air, and it sounds alarming, but you have to go back we went back to 2018, I think, and we'll put the chart up, I'm sure, but we went back to 2018 and looked at total domestic violence cases that were presented to us, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And in reality, in 22 and 23, the number 900 wasn't quite enough. It's actually like 1,100 something. But it was because the total volume was going up. In other words, what you can clearly see from this chart is that we were doing more domestic violence work. We were keeping more cases. We were charging more than had been even historically before and during COVID, before my administration, charging more cases. And so it was totally wrong. It was a complete mischaracterization of the data. I'm relieved because that's a really critical unit. What I'm very concerned about, so at least we learned something really, really important by doing that quality control check, which is that, as you can see from this chart, when you look at 24 and you look at early 25, the first 2 months of 25, we're continuing to have a significant problem. And this is where, instead of misinformation, we need collaboration. And that's why I've been privately visiting all of our domestic violence stakeholders to make sure we're all working together and doing the very best we can. Because unlike homicide, armed robbery, aggravated assault, other violent crimes that have really dipped back down since the COVID spike, domestic violence is persisting. And so it remains a top priority here.
When you look at the year of 2024, what do you think is your biggest accomplishment aside from getting reelected? Aside from that one, let me rephrase that. What do you think the biggest lesson was? From 2024? I always think of things, I think, internally and externally. Mm-hmm. So internally, I think we saw salaries go up again as part of the countywide class and comp, and that's huge. And also just general, I felt like morale continues to go up. I can really see joy. I also want to point out
the number of felony jury trials. And I'm going to fail to, we'll throw it up on the screen because I'm going to fail to remember what it was, but it was, I gathered all the troops and mentioned that point about how many felony jury trials were accomplished in just 1 year, because it's a mind-blowing number that they should be so proud of. Externally, piloting the restorative justice cases, watching some success that we're going to start sharing about soon, achieving something a bit more than just justice, but actual healing, which is so critical for someone who's been harmed and so important for making sure people don't keep committing harm, that they learn from it. So those would be accomplishments. Lessons are more difficult. I feel like we learn lessons every day here. If you're doing it right, we learn something amazing, I think, every day, which I think helps us do a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. That's what's driving me right now. Is I want to see if we can do a little bit better tomorrow than we did today, and just keep pushing
and keep going forward.
Yeah.
And as we go forward, that leads me to my next question.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the people want to know, right? The vision, the future of the county attorney's office. We know what's happened over the past 4 years.
Yeah.
So where do you see us going moving forward?
Well, one thing is that I want to look at all 4 years. And what I mean by that is, when we first arrived in 21, we were in crisis because of COVID. Like everyone, you got to keep the systems running. You got to just keep the trains on the tracks and going forward. So we couldn't, I couldn't be thinking too much at all, really, honestly, about like 2023 or 2024, right? But we want to be strategic. We want to have good plans ahead of us for this year to come, but we want to be thinking about what we might be able to achieve in 27 and 28. And part of that is building our workforce back up with both recruitment and retention. I'm very excited that we've hit, or maybe are exceeding a little bit, our max number of prosecutors, which then allows me to demonstrate that we need to be going back towards that much higher number that was here years ago. Getting a few more positions from the county to make sure that we have enough people here to meet the needs of the community. And so I think about a strong workforce in 27 and 28 where we're doing high detail, high quality work instead of really good volume work, if that makes sense.
Now, one thing about this office I can tell you for sure that I've learned is we are a hotbed for hot topics. Okay.
We are.
Yes, we are. Whether it's reproductive health,
right,
immigration, all these things that are happening now. What are your thoughts about where those things stand today? Like when it comes to especially because immigration is one of the biggest issues now, but reproductive health, actually all the work that happened in this office paid off.
So this is where I get to really shout out the civil division, because criminal gets a lot of attention, of course, as it should. I mean, our mission in the office is to prosecute and hold people accountable and seek justice and seek fair outcomes. But we are also the county's attorney, right? We're not just the DA, we're also the county's attorney. And they have absolutely risen to the occasion, to the demands of the day. I mean, reproductive health, that litigation hit, like a brick wall. I mean, it just came for us fast. Overnight, discovering that, the stay of protection, that piece of paper that was protecting reproductive health services statewide, was sitting in our courthouse. And so that was the civil side, Chief Deputy Sam Brown, Chief of the Health Law Unit. We have a health law unit, Jonathan Pinckney, absolutely rising to the occasion, and recognizing that case required hyper-technical expertise in statutory construction and legislative history and strategy, high-level strategy of when we were going to litigate and where we were going to litigate and on what timeline, matching the opportunity for the people of the state of Arizona to speak on the ballot. And so we needed nationwide experts. And we got help from think tanks around the country. Planned Parenthood National obviously was a litigator on the case with us, but also the Public Rights Project. We met just brilliant stars, legal minds from across the country. And now we have that network in place. So when I wake up on a Saturday morning and the county administration needs a memo that county department directors can use if federal agents are to walk into a county department and to ask for sensitive information, what do people do? And working Saturday and Sunday was that day in which a massive operation rolled out on our streets here in Tucson. Our people needed, Pima County employees, 7,000 of them, and departments that work around the clock, like public health, like the health department, needed emergency legal advice and access to legal advisors. And I really saw everybody ready for that moment, ready to rise to the occasion, produce the work, get the word out, so people feel reassured as much as possible in this moment in time that we're in.
I mean, I was thinking about too the criminal division, victim services. Those divisions. We have there's a phone in victim services. There's a phone. Someone's always on call. In criminal,
right,
when there are homicides and things like that. What say you about the work that they do 24/7? Really, it's not 9 to 5 for them.
Right. No, it's not. It's not. I mean, the crisis response that victim services does is always on. Right. The homicide call-out phone is always on, and that might have been eye-opening a little bit for civil as well. That for the first time in the agency's history, to my knowledge, we needed an on-call phone for civil as well. That number would be accessible to department directors and obviously, of course, the deputy chiefs over at county administration. For all the reasons we've talked about, we don't want someone in a reception room of a county department or a librarian or someone being asked to turn over people or paperwork and having to make that decision alone, right? They need to be able to get, their supervisor needs to be able to get legal advice immediately. And because we want to responsibly cooperate with a lawful court order, or if we're looking at paperwork that doesn't seem sufficient, we need to consider running to court immediately. And we need to be vigilant about the possibility that this is not an authorized person operating under color of law. And that was a real concern that I had. And sure enough, we've got criminal prosecutions going in 3 separate states where people were imposters. They were not real federal agents, but they looked and dressed and acted that way in order to unlawfully cause harm and try to get access to people and sensitive information.
Yeah, and I think that is a situation that I feel like it's evolving, right?
Right.
There's going to be a lot of court. There's going to be a lot of evolution when we finally come to the conclusion of what happens with that.
Right.
Let me shift gears just a little bit. So I'm sure people probably want to know, what is the toughest part of your job and what brings you joy in your job? You used the word joy so much. I had to ask what your joy is in this job, but I want to know what the toughest part is for you.
Oh, that's interesting. So internal and external again. Internal, the job is an administrator, right? I mean, and we talked a lot about that when I first arrived. You're not a trial attorney anymore. I was. You're an administrator, and when you sort of feel responsible for the welfare of 350 plus people, life is going to life. People are going to get real sick. They're going to lose loved ones. They're going to have accidents, and that's hard. There is a special care that you feel. And those moments are really, really hard when someone on your team is struggling and you wish you had that magic wand. Externally, I would certainly say still the promise I made to sit down with anyone, personally in person, any family that has lost a loved one due to a criminal justice incident, a system incident. I always set aside 2 hours, and those are hard because the loss is great, the grief is great, the confusion and uncertainty is so hard, and it's the same thing. It's that magic wand. By the time I get to meet this family, the worst thing has occurred, and the question is, how much can we do to try to mitigate the harm that they're in through doing the best we can on the prosecution side, our victim advocate doing everything possible to support them and offer services and whatever recompense we can. But we can never do the one thing we wish we could, which is to have their loved one in the room with us. So those are really, really hard meetings.
Mm-hmm. The joy. Okay, we can switch to joy. The joy. Recruitment of young attorneys who want to come start their careers here. Mm-hmm. There's not much more joyful than that. I got advice from this wonderful chief deputy out of Seattle a few years ago, and said, go to the law school, go to the career fair, go wherever, and you might be the only elected in the room, and go show them how important it is to you who gets to come in the door, especially in a prosecutor's office, because they hold so much power. And so you want good people holding that kind of power. And so I was just at the law school a couple weeks ago, and one of our longtime clerks, who's been with us already 2 or 3 years, mm-hmm. she took me around to visit all the rooms, and I was delivering Girl Scout cookie boxes. Nice.
To the, so I interrupted a couple of the interviews of, here's like this third year law student sitting there. And I quietly interrupted and I said, I'm so sorry for this brief interruption, but, if you're going to ask your people to sit in a room and do 8 hours of interviews all day, like, it's in the policy manual. at the people's office.
Okay.
That the boss needs to deliver Girl Scout cookies
Very nice.
to help out. So that was,
I didn't know you did that.
I did do that a couple weeks ago, and you know, I mean, I remember being a law student and dreaming of getting to practice law, and so it's such an honor when anyone ever chooses to want to start their career here. Not to mention, you know, when the veterans knock on the door, you know, when someone's like been 20, 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And they've got a bird's eye view of the whole system and the whole county. And they're like, you know, I'd like to come join you and come help out. We've had a couple more just arrive recently. And that's been very, you know, former Judge Kendrick Wilson, you know, has returned here, for example, to join us again. That's pure joy. That's pure joy internally. And then externally, of course, anything, you know, picking up garbage, resource fairs, you know, where I'm doing fun, you know, safety fairs, and I'm doing fun things with neighbors and kids, and we're doing something good for the community, and feeling good about it, and listening to good music, and yeah.
Oh, very good. See, I see the joy. I love the joy.
There's a lot of joy.
Good. Joy is good.
There's a lot of joy.
Yeah. So I'm gonna wind down, and then I'll let you take over. So what would be your closing message for the public, and what would you like to relay to all the people, the 300 people who work here now? A message for them, whether it's about the future, whether it's about how you feel about working with them. What would you say?
Wow. I'll start internally. So now I'm really going to put a date on this podcast, because yesterday is a rare time, I think, when my faith is on display, because it's Ash Wednesday. So the ashes are literally on your forehead. And a few employees stopped me in the lobby and said, "Oh my gosh, is it Ash Wednesday?" And I said, it is. And, you know, and they were like, "Oh, it's late this year. I overlooked it." And one of them said, "You know, my mom is going to be mad at me." And I said, "Well, you should know that I prayed for all of you. So you might be covered." And I think, and I hope everyone here knows that it's not just Ash Wednesday. I pray for each and every one of you every night. You inspire me every day. You inspire everything that I do. You have chosen to be here and not there. And I get that. And you inspire me to keep fighting for your wages and your beautiful building. And everything in between.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
If you squint your eyes, it is a beautiful mid-century modern building. She just needs some love. She just needs some love. So I don't know. That's the message I would say. I wanted to continue working with you so much. I put myself through another campaign, because they are brutal and painful. But I wanted to keep working with you here and not there. Externally, I want to promise that I used the transition time again, right, August through December, January, to listen to. I did that listening tour, and I've decided to just kind of keep it going. I want to hear your concerns. I want to be accessible and available, because we want to do a little better tomorrow than we did today, and I'm committed to that for another 4 years, God willing, and the river don't rise, as my brother would say. And thank you for letting me give it my very best try.
Well, there you have it. I'm all out of questions. You got as a former journalist, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything I didn't ask you about?
That is something nice that they do at the end of interviews. No, I think. Thank you so much for asking these. They were fascinating questions. She gave them to me in advance. I failed to. I am too busy. I run too fast.
I did toss a few extras in there that you didn't know about.
Yeah, so that's very unvarnished, which is the best way, I think, the sincere way. Thank you for joining us again. As always, you can go online and submit a subject matter expert, a topic that you'd like to learn more about. We'll try to bring in some fascinating subject matter experts and dig in on the next topic that we should learn more about together. And until then, be well.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and PCAO newsletter. We'll have links in the description. If you have a show idea or questions, just email us at thepeoplesofficepodcast@pcao.pima.gov. Until next time, thank you for joining us. To be continued.